Hi everyone, welcome to How Can I Help My Child to Print, Part 2, where we look at lowercase letter printing. So today, I hope you guys can I can help you guys develop an understanding of proper letter formation, provide you with insights on how to encourage successful lowercase letter development, and become a little bit more familiar with double-lined printing. We also want to look a little bit at the multisensory activities, which are always fun and motivating, to help build these skills with children. So when we're looking at printing and letter formations done correctly do matter. Sometimes we can get very excited when a child forms a letter and we don't really pay attention to how they actually formed it. And the stroke sequence is actually very important to know. So letters that are not correctly formed can lead to future difficulties with legibility. So when they're little, maybe in the preschool and kinder, we're very happy that they can make their letters for their names. But if they're forming them wrong, eventually when they're learning to print during these stages of the younger ages, eventually when they transition, maybe around grade 2, grade 3, to printing to learn, that's when they're going to have a lot more written work that they have to be responsible for. And that's when you're going to kind of see that noticeable difference with their legibility. And they might have a little bit of more sloppiness per se. And so if we can try to form good habits when we teach our children to print, then moving forward, they'll be more successful with organizing their print and with their legibility. When we look at lowercase letters, all of them start from the top except for D and E. So it's very important that we always have that, we have to start our letters from the top in our mind, because starting from the bottom, again, that can affect our legibility. When you're printing to learn again, when that transition happens and you're trying to write fast, and you're starting from the bottom and going from the top, that's kind of when you're going to get that sloppy effect. We want to teach correct placement of letters on the line when teaching how to form each letter for our lowercase. So that's important too. Kids don't necessarily know how to use lines. We have to teach them. So some tips on teaching. We do want to, or you as the adult, want to model the letter for them that they're doing. So you're going to sit across from them, and you have to realize, also be mindful that you're not going to make your letter backwards, because to you, what is correct this way might not be correct for them that way. So just keep that in mind. You want to say vocabulary when modeling the letter formation. Really and truly what vocabulary means is, again, that stroke pattern, that stroke sequence that I was talking about. I really like the Handwriting Without Tears printing program. And so that is a vocabulary that I am more familiar with, and I enjoy a little bit more. So that's kind of the vocabulary I'm going to be using. Not to say that other printing programs are not equally as good or have great vocabulary. I just have more experience with the Handwriting Without Tears. And so, for example, example of letter vocabulary is, say, lowercase letter A. You would say magic C, up like a helicopter, bump, back down, bump. And I'll explain a little bit more about what those bumps mean as we go on, but that's an example of what I meant by saying the vocabulary. So have your child imitate you. So if you are, doing that letter A, magic C, up like a helicopter, bump, back down, bump, then your child is going to do it right after you did it. Okay, so they're going to imitate you. And then you can also have your child say that same vocabulary when they're doing it. So they're hearing it again and they're saying it. So it's kind of getting more and more embedded in their memory. And then solid lines versus dotted lines. I do prefer using the solid line. What happens with dots is sometimes If they're separated, if the dots are separated enough, kids just end up connecting the dots instead of actually learning the stroke sequence. So if you transition, if you're doing the letter A again, for example, and if they did just connect the dots and you transition to, a blank sheet where they're trying to do the A, even though they might have done that worksheet several times connecting the dots, that's exactly what they remembered that they were doing, connecting dots, and they didn't actually remember that stroke pattern. I would recommend using the solid line. Sometimes in the resources I've seen that their lines are the dotted lines are very close together. And if that's the case, then that should be okay. Ideally, I would like a solid line. If you have a lot of resources that are already dotted, that is fine. What I've done in the past is I just took a marker and I just went over it and I made those dotted lines solid. And then you can photocopy from that page and then you can hand them out to your students or use it with your child repetitively. So there is a way to kind of modify existing activity sheets that you might have. And no matter the letter activity that you do with your child, just remember to be consistent. Okay, on how you're teaching things, and all the tips that I just mentioned, just be consistent on what you're doing with those tips. Again, we want to be consistent with that vocabulary that we want to use to teach our children. Lowercase letter vocabulary, like I said, I do have a preference with the handwrite without tears, and they group their letters into they put their lowercase letters into groups that are similar to each other so that letters are more easily formed in that group, right? So they have one group, they have magic C letters. One group, they have diver letters, and they also talk about letter stories. They have several other groups that they categorize letters into, but just due to the time restraints that we have right now, I can't necessarily go into all of them. But they do have teacher guidebooks for all levels of print, and you can find all of these inside there. They have, it's a great resource to review. They have a lot of strategies in there. Some of them are what I'm kind of going through with you right now. So if you did need a little bit more help, a little bit more understanding, I would check out the teacher guides. And sorry, this is an example of a teacher guide. So that's kind of what that looks like. So that is, it says the first grade printer teacher's guide. And you don't necessarily have to go by level. This is the corresponding workbook. This is what you're going to give your child to work on. And notice that it doesn't say the grade level on it. So if they're working at a different level, they wouldn't necessarily know. When teaching letter formations, using a double line, that is something that is a great strategy to kind of help facilitate how to place your letters properly. And so you can see here, that is how a double line would work. So this is another cute little resource from Handwrite Without Tears. So you can see that. So they have the top space, the middle space, and the bottom space. So if you are, all the small letters are going to fit into this middle space right here. All the tall letters are also going to fit in the middle space, but then they're going to go a little bit higher. And then all the diggers or descending letters are going to fit in the middle space, but go a little bit lower. So by teaching the double line, again, visually, it's a little bit more simpler. They have that middle space indicated, so you can kind of really work on that placement. And I know I was holding this up, but if you didn't catch it, it says more than half of the lowercase letters fit in that middle space, including most frequent used letters, A, E, N, O, and S. So really, it really truly helps us get that placement going. And you don't want to not introduce other line papers to your child. This is just simply when you're first teaching your letter formations. You do want to seek opportunities for practice on different styles of paper. I think the triple line, so you have the two solid lines and the dashes in the middle. Those are used quite a bit. So you don't have to shy away from them. You can definitely show them. And it really kind of transitions nicely into those line papers. So Magic C letters, and so I'm going to try to give you a few examples of how to teach these letter formations. So Magic C, so this is why they're called Magic C, because Magic C letters, so this is just a blackboard here, and I'm going to try my best so that you guys can see. Magic C turns into A. It's a little sloppy. Magic C turns into D. Magic C turns into O. Magic C turns into G. And Magic C turns into Q. So if you can appreciate that, by teaching the child the letter C, the Magic C, they can form 5 letters. They can help form 5 different letters by knowing how to form that Magic C. The next letters are our divers. So they dive down. They start with the same pattern. They're going to dive down, swim up, and swim over. So letter P, you're diving down, swimming up, over, around, and stop. Letter R, diving down, swim back up, and over. Okay, so that's kind of the idea with our diver letters. N, diving down, swim back up, over, and down. N has 1 hump, and then M has 2 humps. So you indicate that we're going to do a letter N, dive down, swim up, around, down, swim back up, around, down. Okay. And so that's kind of like how you would do your diver letters. You also have letter stories, because there are always letters that, even though you teach them strategies with your specific printing program, they're still tricky for kids, right? So we have letter B, E, F, G, K, M, Q, S, and then our Z, and then our capital T and lowercase t. So again, these particular ones are found in the guide, the teacher's guide, and they have like cute little stories for each of them. And I mean, there's always stories found other places too. If you Google letter stories for lowercase e, or letter stories for lowercase b, or if you go to Pinterest, or there's lots of resources out there. Again, Handwriting Without Tears is just something that I am more familiar with and have a little bit more success with. So I guess if you want to know one of them, so let's say make the letter H. So you're kind of making the letter H. Now let's make another H beside it. I have a surprise. This H is for a honeybee. So turn the H into a B. So that's just one little kind of story that they found helps kids remember the B, because I know B and D sometimes are the tricky ones out there. All right, so now we have our some samples of our multisensory activities. So using different senses really helps with learning. And they're great for children of all skill levels. So even if your child's not ready to use that pencil right at that exact moment in time, this can be a very effective way to teach them stroke patterns and letter placements without actually having them be required to pick up that pencil. So I'm going to talk a little bit about wet, dry, try. And I'm just going to erase my chalkboard because I need to use that to show you guys. So wet, dry, try is a very fun activity, and it gets them a little bit more opportunities to form that letter correctly. So with a chalkboard, so this is the same chalkboard I was using earlier, and it is a product of Handwritten Without Tears. If you don't have that chalkboard, that's fine. All you need to do is find a chalkboard and maybe just paint some lines on it. Okay, and like a little, like thick enough that they have a good space, right? Sometimes I've used masking tape in the past too, and for temporary, if you do want to use a chalkboard for something else and you don't want to make it permanent, then you can try to use masking tape. So wet, dry, try. So what you would do is you would write that letter first on the board, and then you would give it to your student. So let's do the letter D. So I'm the teacher right now, so I'm going to say again, like magic C, up like a helicopter, up higher, back down, bump. When I say bump, it means you're hitting the line, you're bumping the line. So anytime that your letter is going to be touching the line and it needs to end there, that bump gives you an additional auditory signal that you have to stop, and you're not going to keep going below that line. Okay. So the wet, dry, try. So now that you've done this, you would hand it over to your child. So you would get sponges. I just simply cut sponges that I had, and you would wet it. So I'm just going to wet it again. All right. And then you would get your child to erase it, but you're going to erase it in the pattern, in that stroke sequence pattern. So magic C, up like a helicopter, up higher, back down, bump. Then you're going to get a dry sponge, and you're going to do it dry, the same thing. Magic C, up like a helicopter, up higher, back down, bump. So that was your wet, that was your dry, and you can see that you still see the outline of that letter. So now, if it's wet, you can blow a little bit, so make sure that you're able to put your chalk on it. And then it's dry. So you might not be able to see it, but I can still see that letter there. So magic C, up like a helicopter, up higher, back down, bump. So that is wet, dry, and try. And if you did have the opportunity of having two chalkboards, again, if we remember our tips for teaching print, you can do the whole thing yourself with your chalkboard, so that you're modeling it, and then your child can imitate it, right? So they can follow after you're doing it. So other Blackboard activities. So this is your little bump the lines. So you can have little lines, or little dots, sorry, and you can practice bumping the line. So you can make these lines for your child. And you can do the exact same thing with your, sorry, I need to get a little bit better in there. There we go. You can do the exact same thing with your wet, dry, try. So down, bump, down, bump, down, bump. And then you're going to take your dry one, down, bump, down, bump, down, bump. And then you're going to do your own down, bump, and bump. My lines are a little bit angled, but I appreciate that you guys probably understand the concept. Bump the lines, and then you can also work on your name. So that's a more functional goal. So if your name, let's do Ted. So, because then I'll show you where the capitals actually go. So again, you're going to be writing their name first, and then they're going to be doing it. Ooh. All right, so capitals, they do sit They do sit over the middle line, so they do come up. They're like a tall letter. Okay, and so the same thing you would do. Okay, like I'm not going to do it all, but you would do your wet. Okay, you can do one letter at a time. So wet, dry, try, wet, dry, try, wet, dry, try. It depends on the level of your child. Maybe you want to do wet, 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 dry, 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 try, 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 and that's okay too. But that's a good functional way to learn their name and to learn how to place them on the lines. And then the last one is word placement, which is great too, because if they do have a name that doesn't necessarily have a lot of talls or diggers in it, they're not necessarily going to see how those letters are placed on the line. So if you try to pick a word that has talls and smalls and diggers in it, so like dog, then they can definitely see how all of those letters fit on the line, right? Oops. So again, so here's your tall, your small, and your digger. So you can have visually, you can see how all of those will fit on the line. And again, you can do like your wet, dry tries. You can even just separate, like these are like, we can just work on our talls on here. So you can do like your T, your F, your D's, your B's, like all of the tall letters. Or you can say we're going to work on our small letters, same thing, or our digger letters. So you can use the Blackboard for kind of a variety of activities. You can see if it suits your child's needs. If the Blackboard is challenging, then don't worry about it. Sometimes the actual using of the chalk is the most challenging. And if they're not there yet because they don't have the strength or the grip to do it by themselves, and it becomes frustrating, you can just do the wet and the dry. And you're still getting that stroke sequence like in your mind and talking about it. You're still developing that pattern. You're just not doing the last step. And that's totally okay. So you kind of just have to go by how your child is. And if they're able to do all the steps, one of the steps, just cater it to their level. Another multisensory activity is using your hands to denote letter placement. And I said not for children learning sign language or using sign language because it's not compatible with sign language, and it might confuse them too. Make a fisted hand like this for your small letters. Okay, so that's your small letters. Index finger pointed up for tall letters, and thumb pointed down for descending letters. So you can just also play a game. So if we're saying, let's do the word dog. Okay, so show me your hand signals for dog. So D, O, G. Okay, so that's how you can also learn those letter placements on the line by using like fun little games like that. So every time you make a word, well, maybe not every time, but like opportunities that are provided, you can stop and say, okay, how are those letters supposed to be on the line? Show me your hand signals. So for and, A, N, D. So again, it's just another way to talk about it and to show visually how letters are going to be placed on the line. The more senses we use, the better sometimes we are able to understand those concepts. Okay, so another cool strategy I found is this Lego brick play. And I did have the link to the resource, I believe, on one of the last slides where the references are. So you can use, they have like the Duplo sized Legos, or they have the regular size for Legos, the smaller ones. So it comes with both versions, so you can print what you want to use. I just did the bigger size for today so we can see a little bit better. They also come with a lot of words already printed off, so like and if and of and that. So it kind of gives you word practice, but for the sake, I'm just gonna write a word here. So now we're going to build it with our Lego. So we're going to have 2, 4, 6, our 6 brick and our 4 bricks. So our 6 bricks are for our talls and for our diggers, and our 4 bricks are for our smalls. So the first step, so this again, you can write it in there as the parent or as the adult, as the teacher, whoever, whatever position you're in. So that's there for them, or you can use their already made ones. And then you're going to take the Legos. And then, so this is a tall, so we need the tall there. And it's going to be a little bit tricky for me to show you this. The O is a small. You can also be using your signals too, right? O. Your D was your tall. Then we have our O. And now we're going to use our diggers. So there. Woo. So now they built it with their Legos, and that's kind of like how the letter placement's going to go. So now you can see below here, it's now they're going to write it. So they're going to stay with that same pattern. They're going to be able to look at this because it's going to be flat on the table, and it's not going to, if I let go, it's all going to slide. So they're going to be able to have that visual, and hopefully it's going to give them another little visual, I guess, per se, to help them with that letter placement. And you can notice that these are triple lines. And like I said, it's okay to use triple lines too. Whatever line that you're going to use, you just have to teach it. Okay, so even if you don't use this and you want to stick with a double line, you can make your own one with a double line. Okay, so if you're just, it doesn't have to be as pretty as this, but you can just like print out a double line here and a double line there, and you can do the exact same thing with these Legos if you wanted to be consistent. This was just something that I found online, and it was free, and I wanted to share with you guys because I thought it was a cute resource. Yes, so just remember your small letters are your 4 bricks, and talls and diggers are your 6 bricks. If it's easier, yes, you can denote like your talls by colors if you wanted to, because I know the talls and the diggers are the same 6 bricks. So if that makes more sense in your mind or in your child's mind, then yes, you can use colors. Another one is our dough letters with mats. So a variety of pre-made ones are available, or you can make your own. So those are just simply just like letters on a card, and Pinterest, Pay Teachers, Etsy, or just regular, go on a search engine like Google and type that in. But this is the one for Hand Without Tears. It is a capital, but C is the same in capital and lowercase. So I thought it was easier to show you guys this. You can roll your Play-Doh ahead of time. I just did for timing, but you can get your child to roll the dough. If it becomes too much of a distraction, then you can go ahead and make it beforehand. And then you're going to get them to place it on your letter. And then again, you can say your vocabulary, magic C. And what I like to do after I do it is just to reinforce it a little bit more, is just to squish it with my index finger. I'm just going to have to hold it here because I'm on this slant. So magic C, and I go all the way down, and it gives them a little bit more of that feedback to do that. Magic C. And you're going to go obviously in the correct way. You're not going to start from the bottom and go up. You're going to start from the top and go down. So that's, again, those are available a lot of different places for free, or you can make your own too. And that's all. If you do have any questions, for sure, please let us know. And thank you very much for taking part of this webinar. Don't hesitate to contact me. My contact information is there. And hopefully we'll see you guys in part 3.